You read Robin's book? You gotta read that.
You don't want to.
No, he doesn't need to read that.
Wait till you read that one.
You should listen to it. It's
She
way
was
better.
stomping on my face.
Oh, here we go.
Whatever.
The only thing you remember.
That's all I remember. And there's a couple of sexual things in there.
Oh,
you
that's
don't
why
want
he
to
doesn't
know.
need to read it. Those are all lies. I made those up because they said the book had to be...
Yeah, you should hear the lie that happened in San Francisco.
Yeah, don't read the part about San
I
Francisco.
made it all up.
I'm trying to think what my wife's first question was. The part where she's involved.
You two have no memory of anything.
Yeah, okay.
The first question was, would you watch the kids for 5 days so I can read it?
Yeah, right.
I learned a lot about Robin by listening to her audiobook, and that was one of the parts that fascinated me. She said she would have these urges to just rip open her shirt and flash cab drivers that were sitting at the corner at a light. And she just had these urges to do, stuff like that back when she was going through a lot of these problems.
You know, it's funny because I read the book and I heard all that. These are things I didn't know. And Jackie used to get all irritated by it. Jackie thought that Robin made stuff up for the book. And you know what he used to call her book?
What?
Quivers A Lie.
Okay, greetings everyone. Welcome to another edition of Radio Gunk. And tonight what we've decided to do is a little review of Robin Quivers A Life. Or as A Lie, as it's now officially called. And what we did on our forum, which is radiogunk.com/forums, is we have these little reading clubs, and they'll pick a book of the month, usually something that some idiot on the show wrote, and just basically pick it apart. And so that's what we did with the Robin Quivers book, because she had to be the person that we started with. I'm sure you've all heard, Benjamin has picked apart both of Howard's books. I look forward to picking apart the new one as well when it comes out in March or April or May or whenever the hell that is. But right now we decided that we would go with the queen of narcissism, and really try to dissect, what's real, what's fake, what is taking a page out of Howard Stern's lies in his book, Lisa G lies in her book, and the feeling is that everything that they did was to just make it a little bit more salacious and something that people would like to read. So it's Benjamin and myself, and we're going to go through the book for you. So I'm just going to start with just a couple of points about it. It was published by HarperCollins April 1st of 1995. So classic that it would be on April Fool's Day, exactly, which is pretty indicative of how we feel about the entirety of it. Isn't that weird when you think about it, actually? Yeah. And if anybody has seen the video of Robin going down Fifth Avenue in an open car with these gigantic boxing
I haven't
gloves.
seen the video. I've seen the photos.
Oh, Benjamin.
You've seen the video?
There's a couple of them that people had filmed of her going down Fifth Avenue. All right, I'm going to find that for you.
Robin was 42 then when this book came out.
Right, 42. Interesting. I'm kind of amazed at how Robin once again gets a pass on her bullshit. Like, they never really ripped her that quite new asshole that they should have for the things that she said in her book.
Well, most of them didn't read it, for one thing.
Well, if you listen to the opening, there's Howard saying that, my wife has the book, and, Jackie actually admitted that he hadn't read it yet. He's just classic. He just pulled bits and pieces. But Gary had read it, I think, and Fred, and, they were all kind of speechless about it, because I don't think anybody expected it to be what she made it into. It was a very... there's a lot of titillation with, her early life and things like that. And the interesting thing is when you look at the reviews on the book on Amazon, a lot of it goes to
people I guarantee haven't read it, by the way. Go ahead.
Of course. Oh my God, I know. But they usually do these tags on the top, and it's copy, funny, honest,
Not
abuse.
Funny.
Abuse.
Not funny. No, but this is a very ugly book. It's like the movie Seven for the entirety. It's dark.
What's in the book? What's in the book?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, don't open it. Don't open it. It's like that movie. It is ugly from beginning to end. It's not a comedy. Robin is not funny, first of all.
No, she's not funny.
I was thinking, because I went back over the notes today, and we'll cover all of this. Robin must have the greatest excuse I've ever read for why she became so heavy. You know, in her Vegetation book, she blames her parents, the government, the school, Western medication. In this book, she orders double food when she goes to drive-throughs, and when she orders Chinese food, because she says she was embarrassed of anyone knowing that she was single in her early 20s. So she would order double the food, or she would eat it. But isn't that the weirdest excuse you've ever heard of someone being a pig? Friendlies is her weakness. Ice cream. She says she didn't feel secure at home unless she had at least a half a gallon in the freezer. Favorite lines of the book, and I know we're going to go in order here, but one of my favorite lines in the book is because it's so typically melodramatic Robin. And then as well, she's in the Air Force, she says, "If not for Wendy's, McDonald's, and Burger King, I would have starved." Now, she's saying, this was in Ohio. "If not for all of my favorite foods, I would have starved to death." Who thinks that way?
She does. Robin has a curious way of skewing the truth and reality, and
yes.
And and she fluffs it all off with a laugh. And as we go through clips, both from on air and from the book, you'll see that, if anybody approaches her about, the abuse question, the anal question, just the craziness that she has allegedly done, she just laughs it off. And yes. Until it gets to the point, 15, 20 years later, that she actually has forgotten all those stories. Now, if you wrote a book about your life, and it was important to you, and these were meaningful, serious things that happened in your life, you're not going to forget them. I don't forget things that, stand out in my life. Not only do you not forget
them, but you don't years later tell your nephew not to read it because it's all made up.
Oh, that was one of the best things in the opening. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good. Because first of all, she says throughout, not only is she an unlikable narrator, an unreliable one. She calls herself and admits to being a liar throughout the book. In fact, at one point she says that up until a certain point in her life, that there was nothing she said about herself that wasn't a lie. She later, when she goes to psychotherapy, admits she began lying to her therapist.
Wow.
She lies and admits it when she's gives an interview with Washingtonian after she and Howard go their separate ways in D.C. She lied and later says, "I was lying when I gave that interview." She has no problem lying. And, you mentioned earlier, Monique, about the narcissism. That her off the charts, or nearly off the charts anyway, score, meaning more than double the average person's narcissism level, you can't overlook that at any stage of this book. It's all skewed by a person with narcissistic personality disorder. That's very important to know when you're listening to the narrator, because they're going to tell things that make them seem more heroic, at least she thought she was, make everyone else seem more forbidding and more of an opponent. In fact, I wanted to touch on the way that they announced the book, or the way that they paraded the book release party. Robin's dressed as a boxer and wearing these oversized gold boxing gloves, and is flanked by two boxers on a flatbed truck, blaring the Rocky theme on a boombox, waving to a crowd who has no idea who she is or why she's at the parade.
Right.
No, and in fact, the New York Times covered it and said that everyone looked at her bemused, going, "Who is this person and why does she deserve a parade?" That is not the tone of this book. Like I said, this book is somber, heavy, accusatory, and ugly.
Well, let's also discuss the fact that she actually thinks of herself as being akin to somebody like Muhammad Ali. I think with the success.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. I think with the success of Howard's book, they probably approached the entirety of the staff to write something. That's why we got They Call Me Baba Booey, which honestly I think is probably the only book that may have some modicum of truth to it, because Gary's just this stupid Gindaloon from Long Island, has no reason to lie about his life, and actually had a life where he had some, a mother who was psychologically and physically damaged, and dealing with his brother's homosexuality and like things that actually happened in his life. Not that anybody has any interest in it, nor the hubris of thinking that anybody cares about these lesser.
Especially 2009.
2009.
Years into.
Wow. And then, it all culminated. It all culminated with the most horrific book known to mankind, which was the Lisa G. Cookie book. You could see, oh my God, I never read it, but I felt the need to write at least 4 Amazon reviews on it. But it was just full of lies because, I guess the formula was, and I think it comes from Howard. I love Benjamin always likes to look back and harken back on Howard's first book, which of course, Benjamin has a dog-eared version of it with highlighter marker going
all
through
yellow highlighting.
Right. And I think that him getting together with Ratso to do that book was also full of lies. We love to talk about, well, Howard said, but Howard lied. Howard lied too. Howard made his life
Howard
much
was
more
the
fulfilling.
co-pilot of that book.
Yes, Ratso made the book.
But actually, I just want to double back for a second. So HarperCollins, who put out Robin's book, they own Simon & Schuster.
Okay, so there you go.
So it makes sense.
Okay, they tried to portray Lisa G as being like some sexy, milfy type of woman, but in reality, she's just a lonely old Jewish lady living on the Upper West Side with a bunch of fucking cats. And, she's always been a prude, she's kind of a bit of a nerd. She plays the violin or the oboe or whatever the fuck she plays, and she doesn't really have an exciting life. She's not an exciting person.
Howard without the makeover.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Without the makeover.
So Lisa G's version of what she thought was salacious and sexy and enticing was nothing. I mean, people were well over this type of book and this type of formulaic book. So, it started with Howard. He got a shit ton of money for that first book. He had to do a follow-up, which literally was just, a bigger font and more pictures.
Yeah, bigger font, bigger margins.
Exactly. So he just phoned that one in, and 2 lie books. So let's get into Robin, because I know we have a lot of clips to go through.
When we decided we're going to do a book club, I said, let's start with Robin's, because I knew it was as ugly as it is. It's compelling because you end up. It does inspire all sorts of feelings inside you. Howard's is just you're going. Do I really want to read transcripts from an interview with Adam West, or whatever it might be? Because his is fluff with Ratso's one-liners.
Well, that's exactly right. I remember I met Ratso maybe about a year after the book came out, a little bit less than that. And interestingly enough, and I don't know if there's any correlations at all with things that happen in Howard's life, but he happened to be dating the most beautiful black girl who was the assistant to the guy who runs the National Enquirer. And so they were like very, very close friends. Ratso was very close friends with Howard at the time. This black girl who he was dating was also close friends with Howard at the time. And I'm always curious about whether or not they were able to keep Howard out of the National Enquirer because of the relationship.
Weird. Yeah, why would Howard be friends with someone's assistant?
No, because Ratso was dating her.
Because of the Ratso
Correct. Not that they were friends. No. But I'm just wondering if that was a conduit to, keeping Howard and whatever he was doing out of the gossip columns for a while. I just wanted to throw that in. I'm sorry.
Good
just a thought.
Special thanks to, above all, she gives thanks to Judith Regan. So, yeah, there you go.
What we're doing is cut up the audiobook a little bit so that you guys can get a taste of just everything. I mean, God, I know you didn't get to too many chapters in this, but there's so much. There's just so much to go through that is just, you're just going to look at yourselves and say, oh my God, this is the most incredulous book I've ever. I can't help but harken back to her dressed like Muhammad Ali and so badly wanting to be the hero because of her sexual abuse and, so much struggle she had to go through in her life to make her a hero. But it's a complete opposite of what you feel or what you take away from the book.
Well, that's also a good point, too. that at age 42 is the start of Robin Quivers' sexual assault survivor.
Right.
Because up until the book release, no one ever knew anything about this alleged sexual assault by her father.
Right.
Meaning, I'm not going to share my story unless I'm getting paid to share my story.
Right.
So this was a surprise to everyone, and she's decided to cast it as the hook of her life. So when I tell my life story, the hook is I'm a survivor,
right,
and I've been fighting my entire life.
Well, it's kind of like I feel like most celebrities that don't really have a lot to say will use that as their hook, like the Lena Dunham book where she assaulted or was assaulted by her sister or some shit like that. Yeah, exactly. And so when they do that hook, this is what she's hanging her hat on. And you're right. She's been with Howard, at that point, 20 some odd years? And none of this has ever been reviewed or talked about. Howard constantly had bimbos in there who would talk about, what porn stars. That was his first question. Who were you abused by when you were a child? And Robin never thought or deigned to mention any of this.
She ridiculed, and by the way, it had only been 14 years at that point.
Okay.
She ridiculed Roseanne Barr, everybody else who, as an adult, underwent hypnosis and discovered, which Robin in a way does also, discovered traumas that were hidden from their past. You want to talk about unsubstantiated? Robin Quivers' father did not know he was accused of molesting his daughter until she handed him a copy proudly of her new book.
Right.
Meaning no one called to fact check. No one, before we publish this thing, that's a very litigious thing to say that you molested your daughter.
But she knew the guy had Alzheimer's and wouldn't be able to defend himself. So, she had a free pass on being able to say this about her. And I can't even imagine her mother, or her cousins or anybody in her family didn't look at her like, say, Robin, what the fuck? Like, are you kidding me that this happened to you?
Yeah. And she had burned every bridge in her family by the time this book was published.
Right, except for her nephew. Which is why she clung on to him. Because he was young he was young and influential. Or she could influence him, is what I'd rather say.
And, it's this family of his and this fictitious loyalty that we'll talk about later on with Robin and why evil management was trying to break up the team and how in DC and how Robin was just too loyal to work with the Grease Man. It's all bullshit. And if there was a better opportunity, and there never will be one because Buckwald will see to that.
That's right.
But if there ever was one, they would have left.
Right. You know what? Like what? Who?
By fake laughing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who wrote this? She's the laugh track of the show. That's what she is, and she's the pass for anything he wants to talk about relating to race relations. Period. That's her entire job. I can only hearken back to maybe a couple of months ago, Ben. I think we had done one of our weeks in review, and Howard had to go take a pee. And he said he left Fred and Robin for a quick moment. They were like, no, we can't do this without you. Like, they literally could not say a word without him on the show.
Robin had only been out of broadcasting school a year and a half before hooking up with Howard.
Right.
She never hosted a show on her own. And, getting back to what you just said about the race thing, 100% that's the reason why. Well, there are two reasons. She laughed at everything.
Right.
And Denise Oliver, who paired Howard and Robin up together in D.C., who had met Robin earlier, knew of Robin because she laughed at everything. And she said, so imagine what she would do if the guy was actually funny. And also because she was black. And now the radio industry is government regulated, the FCC. The government, even back then, was big on saying you should hire minorities.
Right.
And so radio stations would look for opportunities to hire minorities so that they could put them on the air and say, look, we're complying. It makes the government feel better if you're actually listening to them. So it's written about in the unauthorized Howard Stern biography. I think Denise even goes on record as saying as much.
And they would put her with somebody like Howard, just to kind of, I feel like they almost threw her to the wolves. She probably came in with like this, complete entitlement as she interviewed. And they said, well, she probably does. She does have a little bit of a melodic voice. And, where could we possibly put her? And the fact that they would put her with him I think was...
No, it was definitely a team-up. They thought of Robin because they were going to get Howard.
Right.
And so Howard had never had a sidekick up until that point.
Right.
And Robin had never been a sidekick up until that point. She was hired to do the news. And she was in Denise Oliver was at one of the seminars that was at the radio school that Robin was at. Robin was leading the seminar, and Denise was impressed that Robin had some kind of composure. Robin was probably much older than the other students, I would imagine, because she is at that point. She was years out of college when she finally decided to turn to radio. But Robin, was very green. So I think she just came in with the laughing at everything disposition then that she continues to have.
Yeah, the composure thing is an interesting thing because, one of the God knows I listen to way too many murder podcasts. And one of the things about psychopaths is their lack of empathy towards anything and anybody and their ability in any situation to lie and or be, in complete control of their mind and their facilities. And Robin actually really fits the psychopath criteria as well, which is a little bit crazy. She has all the elements of being that person. You ask anybody we've ever had on the show or that I've ever been in contact with or anything, right? I mean, Ben, don't all of them say, Robin is the best. Robin is wonderful. Robin is, the most amazing, sweetest, kindest person. Nobody ever wants to say anything bad about Robin. And I think it's because she makes up for her complete and utter evil by throwing her money at shit. So it makes people feel like she's a nice person, but in reality, all she's doing is buying their love and buying them from kind of, peeling off that first layer of her.
Right.
Kind of like
there
they
are
live.
Definitely people who Robin admits to in the old days, the interns were always feeling her wrath. So we haven't spoken to those interns, but Gary was among them as well. But Gary is a Buckwald client who will.
John was as well. John was her intern for a while as well.
Right, and he had a volatile relationship with her.
Yeah, he hated her.
Where she gave him a silent treatment for something like 6 months.
Right, that's exactly right.
And then would make out with him another time. It was very volatile.
I know somebody who was abused by a parent, and she left her house at 16 and got married, and moved as far away as she possibly could from her parents. But also, there's something to be said for if one child is being abused, then other children are being abused as well, and that winds up being like a really horrible discourse, and the fact that she had two parents who loved each other, who stayed with each other their entire lives.
Not only that, but fostered other children.
Fostered children, exactly.
Brought in Robin's cousin to live with them.
Yes. So people like that, tend to not, that would tend to be the most horrific place that she could possibly be. I could see her leaving, running away at 16. If you're abused by your parent, you're getting the fuck out of your house. I mean, it just makes sense to me, no? I mean...
Well, yeah. If we want do we want to just jump to that? That's the hook of the book.
Okay, let's do it.
What I personally consider my first heavyweight title bout was in 1964 when I was only 11 years old. My opponent outweighed me by about 100 pounds. He was about 7 inches taller than I was and much more experienced. He didn't respect me. He was mauling me, pawing at my breasts with his big ham hands and forcing his fat tongue down my throat.
Ew.
When I resisted, he laughed and simply picked me up in a bear hug, pinning my arms at my sides. I wound up with my head over his left shoulder. Suddenly, I saw what might be my only opportunity to win this bout, so opening my mouth wide, I sank my teeth into his bare skin. He tried to push me away, but I wouldn't let go. With one powerful thrust, he pushed me off him. He reached for his shoulder to make sure he wasn't bleeding. He didn't want any telltale evidence, and he was lucky I hadn't broken the skin. "Why are you trying to hurt me?" my opponent demanded, a puzzled look on his face. "Because you're hurting me," I snarled at him. "Oh, okay," he conceded. "Just don't tell her." "Fine," I hissed as I stalked past. "Fine, I won't tell Mother, Daddy."
Okay. Can we?
Well, so they obviously left out a line there because this is not the extent of her alleged molestation.
We have parts. We have like 5 parts.
Okay.
We have 5
Right. So she was clothed during this, by the way. This breast touching.
But wait a second. Can we just discuss a 11-year-old who has grown up in a household with 2 parents, being the fighter of the man who's 7 inches taller than her? I'm just not feeling the empathy for her. I must confess.
My victory that day was the culmination of months of fear, torture, and guilt. When it started, I was 11 years old and in 6th grade at PS 59 in Baltimore, Maryland. It started innocently enough. I had just gotten home from school. Daddy was off from his job at Bethlehem Steel, and my mother was out shopping. I was headed for the front door to go play when Daddy called, "Robin, come here and give me a hug. I haven't seen you all day." I thought the sun rose and set on my father, so just like any kid who loves her daddy, I ran to him. He was my favorite parent, my best friend, and my savior. I thought my dad needed lots of hugs because my mother constantly complained about him, argued with him, and spurned his affection. Who wouldn't need a hug under those circumstances?
Wow, 11. Okay, can we just go back to when we were 11? Like, did you ever...
Well, look, I can even make it more personal here. During the 6th grade year when this happened, Robin was performing so badly that her teacher put her in the slow class the next year. But it is worth noting that during this time when this thing allegedly happened, Robin was recognized as not being very good not being a very smart student.
Well, do we think that she was faltering because she was being abused? You know what I mean?
She never makes that connection, ever. She, in fact, puts all the blame on a teacher with a vendetta against Robin's cousin.
Oh, because my first thought is, okay, maybe she's failing because of the abuse, right? So,
of course, yeah, she's right. The teacher is not saying, what's going on? Is there something going on at home? Saying, I hate your cousin, so I'm going to put you in a dumb class.
Clung to my daddy, my eyes closed, and after a reasonable amount of time, I tried to drop my arms. But he was holding me so tightly that I couldn't get free. He just hugged me tighter. Something was definitely weird. He kissed me on the cheek, then he kissed me on the lips. After he kissed me, he let me go. I backed away from him in shock. I love you so much, Robin. I kissed you that way to show you how much I love you, but your mother wouldn't understand, so this just has to be our little secret, okay? He said all of this in very reasonable, measured tones. Okay, I answered. Can I go out now? Sure, go ahead. Oh my God, my father has fallen in love with me, I thought as I bolted from the house. How romantic. But later that evening, when my mother returned from shopping, my father seemed to have forgotten the whole incident. He treated me just as he always had. Maybe he wasn't in love with me after all. There was certainly no evidence of it now, and there wouldn't be until we were alone again.
One of the reasons why you're going to find it very hard to find any sympathy for Robin is because they are so determined to make everything pay off as a boxing fight and a warrior thing.
Right, so we need the analogies. It's all the analogies.
Cram that language in there.
Wow.
War paint. My opponent.
Battle of my life. Right.
Yeah, it's bad writing and editing, and
Horrible.
it makes it hard for you to feel for this person. Feel inauthentic.
Yes.
And does his reaction, that sort of like, don't tell your mother, don't tell her, does that sound like the man who beats his wife? It sounds like he's afraid of his wife when he puts it that way. But whether that's the case or not, Robin is very equipped to tell the story of childhood trauma because she underwent classes in her 20s where she heard story after story after story of women sharing abuse that was given to them by their father, by their brother, or whatever. So, and by comparison, by the way, hers is tame. There was no
overt sexual penetration.
There was no
like that, right?
penetration.
Right.
There were no photos taken. didn't continue on for years. It ended immediately when Robin bit his cheek or whatever. She continued to find him attractive and hang out with him.
Wait, I'm sorry. So this whole abuse thing was only, until she fought him off, and then that was the end of it?
Yes, it never again happened.
If the parents are fighting and stuff like that, would clearly indicate to you a father who's, probably an alcoholic or something like this. So that's like
there are definitely components to this that make you go, I can see that happening. They front load it right at the beginning of the book. But once you get to know Robin more, and once you get to see, because by the way, she says after biting his cheek that she was now feared by him for the rest of their relationship. By doing that, by just merely biting his cheek because they were roughhousing, the father is only 7th grade educated, and he's cheated on his this is her second marriage. She's cheated on Robin's mother. There are things there that you go, okay, maybe this guy did go too far. But when you get further in the story and realize that Robin is a liar and will confess to it,
a pathological liar.
What?
A pathological liar.
Yes. And the only time she's ever shown remorse, by the way, are when she's lied about someone who's useful to her. It's the only time she's ever said, I was wrong to do that, which is Howard. It's just she was wrong to lie about. So she's a liar, and she's vindictive, and she sees herself as a tyrant. I mean, she describes herself as one later on.
She's proud of herself.
She says, and in fact, when she starts making money and she moves back in with her parents, which probably few people who are making money do, when the father is an alleged abuser, she says that now they were totally afraid of her because she's everything she said she was. Now she was finally the chosen one.
She's 11. She's like fucking Chaka, the feral little caveman from fucking Land of the Lost.
10 years later, that line I just gave you. But her fantasy always was to be seen as this chosen one.
Chaka.
And it's important to her, I think, by any means necessary, even if it means misremembering after going through therapy, or I'm sorry, not therapy, through seminars, misremembering an incident and going, you know what, I think that was molestation.
Yeah,
that's my
early Me Too. Early Me Too. All right, let's move on to part 3 of the bullshit molestation origins, allegedly. Hold on.
Soon my father managed to work these encounters into our family routine. He was off from work every Thursday, and my mother decided that Thursday would be her shopping day, since he could babysit for the foster kids we boarded. Shopping was an all-day affair, so he knew she wouldn't be back for at least 2 hours after I got home from school. I couldn't talk to my mother about it because I never talked to her about anything, especially not my problems.
Her problems.
Robin's view of it might be that they actually are caring parents. They only had 2 kids. Her father always wanted more kids, right?
Maybe needing the money, especially if he's a steel worker.
Yeah, it could be. But, Robin is above all dismissive of people and doesn't see goodness in people.
That's right.
So she would belittle it and say, oh, you're just watching kids because you need money.
Right. I agree. All right, let me continue the clip.
As these clandestine meetings continued, I started to think that they were all my fault. Maybe I had been too nice to my father. Maybe that's how he got the impression that it was all right to kiss me this way. But even if it was my fault, I didn't know how to make him stop touching me. I thought, and at last came up with a plan. Since fathers aren't supposed to allow their children to do bad things, I figured that if I started acting really bad and pretended that I liked his kisses, he'd stop. Jeez. On the next shopping day, when Daddy pulled me to him, I put my plan into action. This time, when my father kissed me, my lips weren't tightly pursed. Boy, was he surprised. But instead of stopping, he got even more excited. "That's it," he murmured. "Now you're getting it." And he kissed me again, this time holding me closer, grinding his midsection into me. I felt something hard pressing on me from inside his pants. He stopped just as I was about to panic. My plan had gone terribly wrong. Every Thursday after that, he took a few more liberties, kissing me on my neck one week and putting his hand inside my shirt the next. Afterward, I always felt that I must be a really evil person, because only a devil could tempt her father into committing such a sin. But as time went on, I started to think that it was my father who was the bad one. I was beginning to hate him.
Okay, I have a question. So she's 11. She knows that it's going to be really fucked up come Thursday, right? Where are the rest of the foster kids? Like, if he's home to watch the foster kids, where is everybody? Where's the family? How are they having, quote, clandestine relationships, which until that point, I guess, just consisted of him, kissing her without shoving his tongue down her throat or anything, until she decided that she would be the one to get in control of this situation by making out with her father? Is that what's happening here? If her mother's just going shopping, what are we talking about here? Like, at what point, if she has... I'm just very confused about this, because if a little girl is going to school and she's in school all day, and the father is off on Thursdays, and the mother chooses to use that day as a time to shop because he has to take care of the foster kids. So is she not actually leaving to go shop until 3 o'clock so that she's not home to take care of the kids? Are they all of an age where they're going to school? And then the mother's staying out until night? I mean, I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, I'm not sure that her story completely holds up when you start asking those details. But, we're hearing her tell those things, even with the position that I have on it, I still go, wow, that's really bad. That's really gross. That's really
gross.
Terrible.
Right, and I'd be sick to my stomach walking into the house.
This is a woman who is very trained, having heard dozens of stories from people. And also I have to ask, if we believe this is real, then what do you have to think about her boss, Howard Stern, and his collaborators for making a joke?
Right.
And laughing about the fact that her father molested her. Doesn't he have to be the worst man in the world to joke about your dad wanting you and
absolutely
your dad sending you Valentines and all that? I mean, that is, and how can she laugh at it?
And they're right. There would come that pull aside moment where she says, "Dude, listen, this is something that happened to me, and it hurts me deep, so viscerally and so deep down inside that it hurts too much for you to say this to other people." But instead, she laughs it off. She forgets most of it, and she doesn't have the feelings that you would think somebody who, proudly comes out and says all the things that she says. She doesn't have that that gravitas, I guess, that you would expect.
She doesn't seem to recognize when, obviously when LaToya came on to promote her book, and when Howard was tearing apart Roseanne for her book, Robin doesn't show sympathy to these people.
None. No.
And Robin's is mild by comparison. I mean, very, very mild by comparison. It's still, if it was true, terrible, but mild by comparison to actual penetration or photos taken or anything like that.
True abuse, yeah. Okay.
One Thursday, he pulled me into his lap as he sat on a kitchen chair and stuck a finger in my vagina. That was it. It didn't feel like anything he had ever done before. It was as if he had crossed some invisible barrier. I thought he'd gone all the way with me. I was petrified that I wasn't a virgin anymore, and if I wasn't a virgin, I might be pregnant. The next 2 weeks were hell, although there weren't any more groping sessions. Somehow I managed to avoid him while I waited to see if I'd get my period. I did know that much about reproduction. My period came. Now I was...
So she knew about her period, but she didn't know that she could get pregnant with a finger, but she's only 11 years old, right?
And wearing clothing, right? Because she's sitting at the kitchen table.
Back in control and ready to fight. Good and ready. My poor father had no idea what he was in for. There was no way that I was a match for him physically, but I decided that he'd have to beat me to death before I'd ever let him force himself on me again. That was when I bit him so hard that he threw me across the room. Once I left the living room arena victorious, I realized that I could breathe again.
Victorious.
It was over. My father never said I'm sorry. He just said, "Don't tell your mother." Well, at least he was never going to touch me again. As long as he kept his part of the bargain, I'd keep mine, and I was good to my word.
Oh, she's so angry.
Yeah. One thing I want to bring up, because when you listen to these clips, I'm sure there are people listening to this. Even as I listen to it, I go, "What? That sounds really bad." Yet I maintain it might not have happened. So someone might ask, Why would she claim this happened if it didn't happen? Why wouldn't someone refute it if it didn't happen? Well, she waited until her father had Alzheimer's before announcing this. And she announced it in book form that you had to pay for. So, and why would she make it up? Well, like I said, and we'll get to this later, but she goes to to these seminars because she gets into this cult in California and realizes she's the only one in attendance who does not have a story of sexual trauma, basically, in her past. When she finally shares this story publicly for the first time with anyone, she's considered a bad bitch. Like, she's tough. She's one hell of a fighter. So there is actually reward for sharing this story.
Right.
So there's a financial reward. There's the status reward of survivor. There's the no fear whatsoever of being questioned because she makes it clear to everyone, my father wouldn't know what you're talking about. He has Alzheimer's. So therefore, no one ever asked him if this was true.
So also, when the book came out, and then she, was on the show, was on her own show, on the Stern Show. There was never a real frank and honest discussion about it. Like, there was never anything that came out with, this happened to me. It was serious. It was always laughter, fluffing it off like it was nothing. It was just a joke. I did it. The book had to be juicy, so that's what I did. And there was never any frank and honest discussion about it.
No. Well, take away this. What does she have to talk about?
Nothing.
She doesn't have a book in her if she doesn't have this hook.
Right. But
Adam Carolla recently said on his podcast that if you're a female comedian and you write a book, you have to include sexual trauma in your book.
100%. 100%.
So getting back to the confessional thing, bear in mind, Howard was ramping up his second book with Judith Regan, which is when he finally revealed to the world that he had and cured OCD.
Right.
There was no confession in Private Parts. This one, which came out just a few months after Robin's book, now had a confession.
Secret would change the whole power structure in our family. Now I could destroy him with a word. No one ever talked back to my father, and when I started doing it and getting away with it, the rest of the family started to fear me as much as they feared him. Still, the newfound power had cost me a lot. I had lost my innocence, and I had lost a parent, a friend, and the person I loved the most. I didn't dare trust another person. I couldn't afford to be let down that badly again.
So, okay, so in the world of Abuse 101, and I cannot speak from firsthand knowledge, and I'm happy to say that, you really would think that she, at 11 years old, had the wherewithal to take control of a situation, control of her father, control of her family, control of her body, control of her life, and I can't remember a single thing about being 11 other than, that school was out and I was going to go out on the streets and, go to the candy store. Like, I don't have
vivid memories.
Vivid memories of things that happened to her. And you know what? I agree with you, Benjamin, in a sense where it's like, geez, maybe something happened to her that made her this person, that made her this cruel, uncaring, apathetic, zero empathy human being that she is today. I wouldn't discount that. I wouldn't discount that something happened, especially if he was, listen, everybody knows somebody's alcoholic dad who's extremely abusive, who yells at everybody, and it's a horrible, horrible thing to have to grow up with. And you could see how this would formulate her future self and how she would put up this shield to, make herself invincible. I do not buy, though, that an 11-year-old, I mean, you hear about this with priests and boys all the time. There's this thing called grooming. They groom those children to love them and want them and need them and trust them and adore them and be with them. And a lot of times this abuse continued well into, their late teen years. So for Robin to have, one moment with her father at a one age, maybe one summer, I don't even know what the hell's going on at this time of the year because I'm just fuzzy on the details.
She's in 6th grade, she's 11.
Right, but
she's not doing well in school.
But that this was it.
Yeah.
Well,
Robin is not the first victim of sexual assault to think, I should fight back. And she makes it seem as though fighting back one time deters you forever.
Right.
If you're a determined drunk and you are hell-bent on getting your way, you can stop her from biting your cheek again or biting your shoulder again, whatever it was.
Right.
So you don't have to cower in fear. So anyway, it's a little too, it's plausible, but also too convenient. And it's also, she must be the only molestation survivor to find her alleged molestation hilarious.
Yeah. You are the fuck out of that house, and you are never going back. Sorry. Okay.
Robin's parents love her so much that while in college, Robin's mom didn't want to see her go. So she said, "I'll buy you this Mustang that you like if you'll stay." So Robin goes, "Fine, I'll take the Mustang and keep living with you." Later sells because the cult needs money from her. So she sells the Mustang they gave her to pay $1,000 for mandatory classes for her cult, thinking that maybe this will make them hire me.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, I want to flip, actually, because this is like a nice little segue. I love, and Ben didn't hear the opening, and people may have heard it, but I just wanted to now flip to 2004 and her commentary on the show.
You read Robin's book, your Aunt Robin?
No.
You got to read that.
You don't want to do
No, he doesn't need to read that.
Wait till you read that one.
You should listen to it. It's
She was
way better.
stomping on my face.
Oh, here we go.
Whatever.
It's the only thing you remember.
That's all I remember. And there's a couple of sexual things in there.
Oh,
you
that's
don't
why
want
he
to
doesn't
know.
need to read it.
Your aunt did something.
Those are all lies. I made those up because they said the book had to be.
Yeah, you should hear the lie. You should hear the lie that happened in San Francisco.
Yeah, don't read the part about San Francisco.
I made it all up.
Yeah, okay. Those are all lies. I made it up because they said the book had to be juicy.
Yeah. And by the way, Robin does not say in her book that she had anal sex. It's just she later revealed that, so we've retroactively put it in the book. It's not in the book.
Oh, we layered that on. Right. That was
Yes, we later added it. Just like we later added in our minds, Robin, sweetie, all that kind of stuff, him knocking on her door and coming, that's all Hamhen's Bill. In our minds, that's what happened to Robin.
Exactly.
Because we've heard it so much.
It was in this house that I would first see evidence of my father's uncontrolled rage. One night I was awakened by loud noises coming from my parents' bedroom. When I walked out into the hall, my older brother Junior was already there. He opened their door. I saw my mother lying on the floor. My father was crouched over her, pummeling her with his fists and kicking her in the stomach. Her dress was torn and she was bleeding. When she saw us standing there, she yelled, "Call the police!" My brother headed for the phone. I followed. My father screamed at us, "You touch that phone and I'll kill you." We believed every word. My mother swore she'd never be beaten like that again, but that didn't mean she was leaving. She cut up all my father's suits a few weeks later to teach him a lesson. At other times, she'd boil water and threaten to scald him with it. They even sometimes threaten each other with kitchen knives. And the violence wasn't only between them. When I was 4, my mother beat me so badly that I had to stay in bed for days while she fed me chicken soup.
Jesus.
I couldn't figure out why one minute she could hurt me so much and then be so nice the next. She never beat me that severely again, but I counted on nothing from her but the beatings, slaps, and harangues. My mother and father were the top of the food chain, cannibals who, with no other food source in sight, began to eat their young.
Your father is capable of beating your mother to the point of bleeding and saying, "I'll murder you if you call the police." Why do you think that your little shoulder bite is making him live in fear of you?
The whole thing, and then the mother cutting up all his suits. I'd fucking kill her. Like, legitimately.
Right. That's not the actions of a woman who's afraid of another beating.
Exactly. And all of a sudden it makes it seem like, the women empowerment and the man was like the very weak guy here. So, these things never happened again. And, her mother was never punched and I guess kicked at the same time, which is kind of an amazing feat if she's on the floor. But, that your kids would live in that kind of fear for such a long amount of time.
Yeah. Well, again, none of these stories are corroborated.
Oh, that's a hard one, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's easier to type. They're not corroborated. So, in fact, Robin quotes her mother's reaction to this book as, "I never knew you saw your life this way." Not, "You're right, this happened," but "I didn't know you saw things this way." That's not comforting that Robin's telling the truth. And also, the whole cutting the suits thing could very well have been because she found out he cheated on her.
The fact that he beat the shit out of her so bad that she sat to stay in bed for days whilst her mother fed her chicken soup. I don't understand that beating portion of this.
We must consider this. We're being told this story by a woman who has had years of psychotherapy, years of cult connections,
indoctrination,
reason to sell a story and make it salacious and full of all. She's utterly unremarkable if she's not talking about all this violence that she endured. So, Monique, if you're impressed that she was laid up for 4 days after getting beaten. When she was in D.C. and found out Howard had accepted a job in New York,
without her,
she collapsed and had no voice for 3 weeks, so she didn't come to work. So this woman is capable of being really affected physically by things.
For the first time in my life, I decided to take school seriously. I lugged 5 or 6 heavy books home every afternoon. I did all the assigned reading. My homework was always on time. By the end of 7th grade, I had become a really good student. Of course, I didn't have the distractions of most girls my age because my interest in boys was on hold.
Okay, so...
What she was saying is she's the head of the slow class. The school system is not set up that you can just send a bright girl to the slow class because you want revenge. She even says in 7th grade, for the first time I started to take school seriously. What's really remarkable, too, is that Robin lives in the same house her entire life, same neighborhood, same everything, and yet retains no friends over the years.
No.
Really strange.
Well, because she's always been this person. She's always been this self-centered narcissist. Always.
So she, I think, is looking back and going, that's why I had no friends. I was better than everyone else.
Of course.
Which she later chastises her community for not following her out of that community when she was showing them the way out.
Even though she lived there her entire childhood. All right,
and not everyone just falls into a career on the radio.
To hide my shame and keep the family together, my father started to mess up.
How is she keeping the family together, including the foster children at 11, 12?
And a reminder, she dedicated her book to these people.
A big time. He started drinking and staying out all night.
I thought he was always drinking.
We used to say you could set your watch by him.
Yeah, right.
Now he was totally unpredictable, out of control, and their fights became louder and more violent. School was my only haven. I went to school even when I was sick. As long as I could walk, I was in my seat when the bell rang. Soon, though, even the tranquility of school would be shattered. Everyone suffered that particular madness of puberty that allows racism to flourish.
Oh, jeez.
I had gone to school with white...
Are we supposed to believe that Robin, with the steelworker father who could barely make ends meet, went to an all-white school?
Yeah, and she was living in a poor neighborhood in Baltimore. By the way, she says, even though she was living in a poor neighborhood in Baltimore and is black, no one taught her how to be black. That's what she says in her book. It's one of my favorite quotes.
They foster all white children? Is that what happened here? I'm kidding. All right, let me finish this up.
My color should make a difference, so it didn't. But I also played with the cliques of black kids that sprung up on the playground. Then one day, one of my white friends showed me that I was different. Arlene and I had been in the same class since we were 5. On Saturday, I saw Arlene at the shopping center walking with someone I didn't know. "Hi, Arlene," I called out. No answer. I assumed she hadn't heard me. "Hi, Arlene," I said again. This time there was a very visible response. Arlene turned up her nose and tossed her hair back. She was very obviously refusing to acknowledge me. I could think of only one reason for the slight. I was black.
Oh my. Robin basically invented 2018.
Yes, she did.
Right in that moment. There could be no other reason that you don't want to talk to me other than you just realized I'm black.
Right.
And know me for 10 years, and you just not realize it.
And of course, Arlene/Stephanie has no recourse in this book to say, "You stupid fuck." I don't even remember the incident, number one. Number two, I probably didn't hear you. I've known you since I'm 5, and all of a sudden, because you're blackish...
I don't associate with kids in the slow class. You know who I want sitting in this book club? Is the person from the whatever organization Robin went to be a big sister as an adult, and we go, you know that woman who you gave a 13-year-old to? You know she was molested at age 13, and you know how they often repeat what was done to them when they're older, these victims? And you know how she hates white people? Well, you gave her a white one. And you know how she used to beat children? Well, you surrendered this kid to her. By the way, Chauncey Hayden, of all people, asked a great question of Robin when this book came out. And I read the interview a couple years ago. He asked her if one of the reasons, does she fear that she may, like many victims of sexual abuse as a kid,
be an abuser herself?
Repeat it. Yes. And Robin immediately goes, no. Now, that's not something you should brush off because it's a phenomenon that is real.
Fairly factual. Yes, that happens.
Yes, because it's traumatic. It's not like it creates something in you. Robin was like insulted that you would be so anyway, I don't think she fully thought out, well, then you will become infected
Well, that's
bit.
interesting because you could also say, people who were abused or beaten when they were children also beat children or also beat people, right, or go into very, very self-destructive relationships. They always pick that fucked up guy, and
when that does not happen with Robin, she's single for her whole life.
Well, maybe
no one's good enough for her.
But maybe that, again, if we're going to find any of her childhood story credible, that would give credibility to, not having children, not being able to get married, not being able to find love in her life. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that pattern, maybe.
But what we'll find later, and I pointed this out in the thread too, is that Robin's unremarkable. She's a booty call.
Yeah.
And nothing more. So she's not. People don't see potential in her.
She's unremarkable.
And, she's had very few serious relationships in 66 years.
Very few. She had Mr. X for a little while there.
Who was an employee at first, right? Wasn't he her assistant type thing?
Yes. And my friends, this is why her and Howard have been together for as long as they are. Because Howard has perceived horrors of childhood with their parents. And, it makes one wonder whether he took his from her or she took hers from him.
I maintain that Howard began inventing his childhood with a massive amount of help from Jackie. After Pat Cooper did the magical radio where his family called in, there was in succession his mother, his daughter, his son.
That was classic radio, though. That was classic radio.
And he's going like, who told you that? All that stuff, and doing the whole mother dear. But it was hysterical,
right?
And I believe after listening to the history of Howard Stern a year ago, in its from beginning to end, that's where I suddenly saw Howard casting his childhood as
in a new light. Right.
I remind you that Private Parts, he does not claim he was beaten up by black children.
Right.
Until after his book comes out that he starts maintaining, I was beaten daily by black children. It was not in his own book. So that's one question is, did Robin get the idea from Howard in a way? But another question is, do these two manufacture these stories if there isn't profit in it for them? No. Howard used his to fill airtime. He had Jackie writing them one-liners, how he was Tarzan among the apes. He had, some audio tape that has just been abused and misused of Ben Stern yelling at him for using the term Japs. And, but these two are profiting off of what was a big trend in the 90s, the tell-all celebrity.
Well, I remember listening to the first time that Howard played those clips of his father because they had unearthed them. Everybody just found them to be just like funny and humorous, and it was just... Yeah. But then he clung to the shut up you moron thing for why he felt abused as a child.
I told you, Howard is laughing the hardest of them.
Yeah. That's a fun thing to find. That's one of those things that you sit around, when you're older in your house with your family and just laugh about it because it was just such silliness. Yep. Not that his father actually meant that he was a fucking moron, although he was. And
he used the term Japs. And
but it was par for the time. It was par for the time.
Well, it was post World War II, and we've speculated was Ben Stern, who was working.
I love that speculation, though, babe.
Yeah,
I do.
I do too.
That's one of those things I would love to find out.
There was a Long Island internment camp, and Ben Stern was stationed in Long Island in WW2.
Exactly.
Roosevelt used to be called Little Tokyo.
Said, I find a good part of this chapter talking about Uncle Leroy more than a little creepy. Basically, it's her father's older brother who she takes to, but here's the quote that really speaks the most volumes. Was I pretty? I'd never thought about it, but Uncle Leroy said I was, and that was good enough for me. How desperate for affection must she have been to place this guy on a pedestal based on that, and the fact that he had more manners than her parents. Later on, they go to the Big and Tall Man's store, where he gets his ass kicked for being a big spender. This really makes Robin think hard about respect through cash. He showed me the power of money. Money was a great leveler. I never missed an opportunity to be with Leroy. Watching him made me think that it might be possible to demand respect, even in Baltimore, without your life hanging in the balance.
Probably the first and only time she ever went to that store that might just have customer service. They might just be nice to their customers to begin with.
Yeah, see, Robin actually takes simple things that happen in life.
Yeah.
Just simple things and turns them into some remarkable introspective moment. I'm still thinking about the girl that she saw in the mall and how, because she basically ignored her or didn't hear her, that it's because she was black. It's like, who would think that way? Who thinks that way except for Robin? Seriously.
Is Robin the Uncle Leroy of the Big and Tall Women's store now that she goes in? They're just saying, here comes the big spender.
Yeah, based on her clothing choices, I'm going to go with no. Robin helping her parents bullshit the state into thinking they're a good family to send foster kids to. Realizing she's black, getting her first job, graduating high school, and looking after a very young baby called Jimmy. I started whispering to myself, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black. No shit, Sherlock. I said it to myself every time I thought about it during the day. When I got up in the morning, I smiled at myself in the mirror, and while I washed my face, I said out loud, I like being black. I like being black. I like being black. Just saying it made them, her friends, respect me more. Robin is special.
Robin, when people say you're special,
it's not
and
because
you're in the slow class, it's not the one you think. Yeah. No.
All right, so does that mean you want me to play the Jimmy clip?
She walks around telling people she's black.
His name was James, but we started calling him Jimmy right away. He came to us straight from the hospital. I remember rushing home from school the day he arrived. I had never seen a baby that young. That afternoon, I did my homework sitting on the steps of the living room so that I...
How bad must your parents have to be if the state will allow you to take a newborn baby home? How horrendous are you if a newborn is allowed into your world?
Now, many children's animated stories start off with some evil foster woman who's got 10 kids just so she can collect the money. But there's investigations that go on. Robin says she lied to help them.
To help them get more babies. Okay, here we go.
As I got more comfortable with Jimmy's size and age, I started spending every moment that I wasn't in school with him. When I was doing homework, I'd lay him beside me. I'd feed him, and then I'd have my own dinner. My mother eventually moved his crib into my room. That was...
Except on Thursdays, when she was getting fingered.
Fine with me. I thought God had sent me someone to love again, someone who would love me without hurting me. I decided I'd adopt him after I graduated from college. We'd get an apartment of our own. I think I was a good parent. I treated Jimmy like a little person. I never talked baby talk to him, so by the time that he was 3.5, he had an amazing vocabulary for his age. He knew unconditional love and found nothing wrong with himself. Even the rough stuff, such as toilet cleaning, was easy with him because I was fascinated by everything he said and did. I wanted to be there for every moment of his life, and I knew that meant forging a life for myself. By the time I was 17, I knew I had to re-enter the world.
So by virtue of Robin being such an incredible linguistic genius, Jimmy at 3 was basically ready for Harvard. Is that what are we?
I began college in the fall of 1970. At that time, I was so into Ali's comeback that I began collecting pictures from every bout. Eventually, I created an Ali collage on my dorm room wall.
I had a question. Is there any mention in the book or anywhere about the Vietnam War and what people were going through and people going off to the war and, you know, maybe people that are her age going off and her losing people in her life or anything like that?
No, she does join the Air Force,
but
never leaves the country.
Post-Vietnam. But that's post the Vietnam War.
I think Vietnam had still been going when she...
No, it was 72, 73, the war was over.
Time magazine cover with Ollie's face bathed in sweat, staring straight ahead into the camera. His eyes followed you around the room. When my white roommate Jean discovered what I was up to, she protested, "I'm not living in any room with that guy." "Well then, when are you moving?" I asked, continuing to hang the photograph.
Very important that we note that she's a white roommate.
Yeah, and this is her first encounter with her roommate.
Wow.
When are you moving if you don't like the piece of art I'm hanging on the wall?
Right, so this is now militant.
There's no
Robin.
negotiations.
No negotiating with Robin.
Once she realized there was no room for negotiation, she learned to live with this black man watching her study, sleep, and undress. I think that she eventually came to like him. In any case, the collection grew with every fight. It became quite the conversation piece. I threw myself into the social world with a vengeance. I learned to smoke, drink, and stay out late, things I'd never done at home. By my standards, I was being absolutely wild, but my friends saw me as a prude and a perfectionist.
Oh.
They couldn't believe that James and I hadn't done it. Little did they know how hard I had been trying to get James to relieve me of this burden of virginity, to no avail.
So the sexually promiscuous, active, abused, molested girl...
She was a virgin still.
Still a virgin. So historically, girls like that who get sexually abused are highly sexual.
Use it as a currency. Use it as
they are highly sexual after after being the abused. And listen, anybody who's on here or listening to us right now, don't give me shit about what I'm saying, okay?
In general.
I'm just saying this in general, and I'm not saying that it's anybody's specific way that they dealt with abuse, okay? So don't beat the shit out of us about what we're saying. I'm just giving this to you by, you know, people that I knew growing up. That's all, okay?
Right, and we're just pointing out all the ways in which Robin strays from expected behavior.
That's exactly right.
Survivors.
That's exactly right. So for her to still be a virgin at 18 years old or whatever she is at this point, and a prude,
and also like begging her boyfriend to have sex with her, basically, it seems like.
Exactly. All right, let me finish the clip.
Our breakup was incredibly painful, but to this day, I'm grateful that he was my first love, and I'm sorry that he wasn't my first lover.
What does that mean? Oh, okay.
I became convinced that now was the time to shed my virginity. The lucky man turned out to be a friend of my roommate's ex-con boyfriend.
Oh,
his name was Billy.
Okay.
He was like all the boys back in my old neighborhood, a decent sort, but not much ambition. I don't think either of us knew what we were doing. The pain was excruciating. I would have preferred to have been stabbed repeatedly, but here I was instead with my head repeatedly banging into the headboard of his bed. My first thought was that what all the fuss was about? But my second was that I was now a proud member in good standing of the Sisterhood of the Sexually Active.
The next clip I have is Teacher's Pet.
She was probably so proud of that sentence.
Oh, of course she was.
You missed something, and that is Robin went through a kill Whitey period in high school. Yeah, it's very wise for them not to have her say in those words that her policy was blacks and whites can't live together. And her motto became kill Whitey. So she and her friends would whisper honky under their breath in high school whenever a white person upset them in some way.
So this clearly has to go back to the Vietnam thing and the Black Panthers and all that shit that existed in the 60s, right? I mean, she's like channeling her inner Black Panther, right?
This was in high school, so it would have been late 60s for her, yeah.
Yeah, so she's channeling her...
Yeah, right. So she was becoming... Now...
Militant.
I don't take this lightly. It's funny how we all kind of just take that lightly, but I don't take it lightly that Robin ever entertained kill Whitey. Because if I had a friend who said for a while there, you know, my policy was kill all black people, I would go, what? How did you ever come to that?
Well, and the fact that half of her friends were supposedly white, and she's going into high school, college the next year, and her roommate is white. Like,
yes,
at what point?
You don't. There's no cure. There's no. I got cured when I realized how stupid I was.
Right.
Or that we're all, in this together. There's none of that. She's no longer kill whitey.
But she never really posits herself as being like friends with a bunch of black girls. She never posits that that's.
I actually don't believe that it's a token. I believe Robin does not like white people.
No, I agree. Even though all her friends are white, by the way.
Yeah,
every one of
right.
them.
And I've seen, if she has to choose a race, I guess she'll choose white people that she'll be around.
No, I think she's changed. I think she's changed because she's wealthy, and she realized that in order for her to live her lifestyle the way she does, where her house is, where her boat, where everything that she has, it basically relates to her friends being white. So I don't think she had a choice. I think money, and I know it might sound really stupid, but I think that money forced her to appreciate the white people in her life because those are the ones that she was actually starting to emulate.
Here's a quote of hers that she says that she deduced from watching Sonny Liston, Another Boxer. You could have a pretty good life in America if you had skills white people could exploit and you stayed in your place.
Wow.
That's one of the things that she deduced. It also didn't necessarily end in high school because when she does get the little sister, when she's successful and living in New York, she's disappointed that it's a white one. She wanted a black one.
Right.
So, she was probably advised not to read. And I don't know what the editors thought was sympathetic about her in all this stuff. Because it's not as though she was a victim of constant attacks and then therefore started to determine whites and blacks shouldn't live together. Another thing that Howard and Robin both have in common is they were suspected gays. And at Camp Wellmet, Howard talks about how he would suddenly start going after the ugliest dogs because the girls at Camp Wellmet thought he and Lou were gay together.
If you troll Robin's Facebook page, which is closed now, unfortunately, so I can't do it anymore, but all her friends were lesbians. Every single one of them. All the pictures that she had on there with her, like at the boat and stuff like that. Yeah. Every single one of them was gay. That's why that's why they get together to watch Mets games. If you remember, they watched football games together. I mean, they were legitimate bull dykes. Most of her friends. And then, you know what? And again, this could be Robin. Right? We get these are all white lesbians who probably all have money, so that's why Robin's able to gravitate towards them because who else is like childless women? That she can hang with that have money.
Brendan Murphy is the closest thing you're going to get to Ellen DeGeneres.
Exactly right. There's about James and her dating. And Robin's first reaction in the book, so it was going to be a summer romance. That was okay. After all, all my objectives have been met. I was really only looking for a summer escort anyway.
The other thing that Howard and Robin have in common is the entire campus is aware of their sex lives.
Mm-hmm.
When I earned my Bachelor of Science degree in nursing, my father cried when my name was called. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I'd overcome plenty of obstacles, but had made major sacrifices to do it. No boyfriends, few parties, lots of work, and no distractions to speak of. Still, it was all worthwhile. I took a job as a nurse in the same trauma unit I had worked in my senior year, and within a month, I was living in my own apartment.
Of course you were.
I passed my boards the first time out and was declared a full-fledged registered nurse. But soon I found myself dissatisfied with everything. I was searching for something, but I didn't know what. That's when I noticed those prepaid postcards for the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force in one of my nursing magazines. On a whim, I filled them out and dropped them in the mail. I'll never forget the face of the enlisted woman who sold me that bill of goods on the Air Force. She had a monthly quota to fill, and she hit all the right chords. We were both single women on our own. Who knew if Mr. Right would ever come along? And even if he did, shouldn't we be having fun and fulfilling some of our own dreams while we were waiting? Finally, I said yes. The one concession I managed to win was a delayed entry of January 1976. As the days passed, I became more and more convinced that I was making a big mistake. Having selected California, Hawaii, and Las Vegas as my assignment choices, I was regretfully informed that there were no openings at those bases. I would be relocating to Ohio. Yes, Ohio. That's what I always say. If you want to see the world, See Ohio.
Wow.
Now I would be completely on my own. I put on a brave face and told myself that I'd be fine.
Oh, because coming from Baltimore, the hotbed of fucking fashion and industry.
That's why when she was going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all of Cleveland was just waiting for her to return. You heard what you said about us. No, I was going to say before when she was congratulating herself for no dating in college, few parties, little to no active.
I thought she was just known as like the hottest thing.
Yeah, I was going to say those are not by choice. She fell into no dating, no parties, no social life because she wasn't invited to.
Right.
It's not like she has such a strong willpower, and her up and down scholastic career with its peaks and valleys. She doesn't have a long history of saying no. I keep my nose in the books.
Well, here's a passage that, going back to the whole lesbian thing, that lesbian question has dogged me ever since. Granted, I've never been like other girls. I'm not afraid to compete with men, and I have never given any good reason to defer to them just by virtue of their gender. I'm definitely not the cheerleader type. Quite frankly, my attitude was that if a man could do something better than I could, he'd have to prove it. I wasn't in awe. I had no respect for them, and I couldn't be talked into anything. Still, for all that, guys liked me. My girlfriends couldn't understand it. They did everything they could to please these guys, but I was the one men came to visit. None of them ever got any sexual favors from me, but they came back again and again. I guess I represented a challenge. Jesus. Yeah, meanwhile, they probably all called her fucking lesbian, and that was the end of it.
Like, she ends up tormenting him so much at work, because they work together. He has to go to Robin's brother and ask him, can you tell Robin to leave me alone? And Robin's brother says, I don't know what it is about you, but you put fear in people.
I got accepted into a pre-nursing program at Maryland General Hospital. I was one of the 4 students from the class to be offered a job by the hospital. I worked 1 day a week on the weekends my entire senior year.
Hold on.
I loved having a marketable skill. I loved the responsibility and the acknowledgement of people whose opinions I respected. It made the prospect of leaving the safety of public school that much easier. I graduated with honors and was accepted at the University of Maryland. The military seemed a lot less draconian than I'd feared.
So the music.
There's music?
On the positive side, I found a homey little townhouse about 20 minutes from base, but it turned out that my apartment was about the only thing I'd enjoy about the whole Air Force situation. Within 6 months, I realized why I'd been so restless. It wasn't where I was, it was what I was doing. I didn't want to be a nurse in Baltimore, and I didn't want to be a nurse in the Air Force, but I was sentenced to it for the next 18 months, and military medicine left a lot to be desired. Now that I knew I wasn't going to be a nurse for the rest of my life, I was sort of treading water on the job, and in no time I was bored. So what do you do when you're feeling bored, unfulfilled, and you're me? You have an affair with a married man.
Of course.
As time went on, the rigors of cheating began to take their toll on me. We started to fight, then break up. The breakups led to incredible reunions, but the strain was showing on both of us. When our affair forced him into therapy, he pulled the plug.
Forced to therapy. Can we think about that for a second?
She's always a passenger, totally unaware where the chauffeur is taking her in life.
Well,
and when she says, I was sentenced to, it's true, she was drunk when she agreed, but she was sober when she signed the paperwork.
Yeah, of course.
And when you say I was sentenced to, it almost sounds like you were drafted. She was not drafted. She chose to join.
Yeah. Okay, let me finish this one.
I was truly devastated and in real physical pain. I thought my heart was literally broken and bleeding. I started drinking wine in the morning to dull the pain and would end up drinking all day. After 2 days of that, I realized I was flirting with an even greater danger. My father, after all, was an alcoholic. I had no desire to wind up like him, so...
You know, that goes back to the same thing we keep saying over and over and over again. So people who grow up with alcoholic parents that are abusive, you know, probably have addictive personalities themselves.
Yeah.
So now she's actually in such disarray in the military, right? Having an affair with a married man, living off campus.
It is shameful. It's shameful that every year for Veterans Day, thank Robin for her service.
Right.
And Robin accepts our thanks.
That's right.
Again, people don't really know what exactly Robin's involvement was, but she paints the story of the worst. I don't know what you call it. Officer, I guess she was.
Well, supposedly she was an officer when she left, right?
Oh, right.
The fastest.
She was a lieutenant when she left, or
right.
I forget what it was, but
it was the fastest succession into officerhood that you've ever heard.
There was no reason for it.
No.
I mean, it must have been token. Because
so brilliant,
there was nothing from her performance, which was she would intentionally not salute her superior officers. She would bullshit. You know what? A superior officer would never let somebody get away with that. Never. It's just not the way the military works. Right. Well, one thing that Robin is happy to say about herself always is that she's a bold rebel, basically. I don't know if she calls herself that, but that she does not cave to authority.
Right.
She
never listens to the man.
And there's, like I said on the thread, I've been listening to her for almost 25 years now. I don't see a single sign of her being that way. She's submissive.
Yes.
She's subordinate. And, the only times that she's ever shows boldness, basically, is to people who are less than her. Not to her superiors. And certainly she wouldn't go around to station managers and say, fuck you, I do what I want, and all that kind of stuff.
Never.
So, I guess you could say she was trying to get kicked out of the Air Force, which she was. So she would never have her uniform pressed. She didn't live on base. She lived in a townhouse that was cozy and cute, she says. She ate all of her meals off base. It's basically she just worked at the Air Force Base.
So are we basically talking? Okay, so let's think of the time frame here now. Okay, so we're just out of the Vietnam War.
1976 she starts.
We lost a lot of guys. Nobody's joining the Army, right? If anything, it's probably one of the lowest times in the point of military history, and nobody wanted to be there.
Which is why they were so desperate.
Exactly. That's maybe the reason she was made an officer in such a short amount of time, because they probably needed people.
They had to refresh their inventory.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it is astonishing that she gets promoted because she shows
did
up
everything
late
she possibly could.
Yes,
to not be there.
So she shows up late constantly. She eventually works her way into the children's ward at night, I believe it is. She would intentionally set her alarm late so she would come to work late. She would start crying on the job and beg. Anyway, one of the things that happens with Robin is she gets overpaid by an amount in 2018 dollars, which is like $48,000.
Right.
They accidentally overpaid her, which is to say you would notice if you were getting overpaid.
Yeah, but,
so Robin would notice that her fellow nurses were always complaining about not having money, and she always had plenty of money. So it turns out about a year into it, she's the subject of a criminal investigation.
Right.
Because
to pay the money back.
Yes, because they realized it was a clerical error.
I want to read this one from Tired. Not saluting is a huge deal, at least in the Marines. What she's describing is what we called in the Marines a shitbird. And that led to a beating first, unofficially, 2 charges, and 3, a dishonorable discharge. Now granted, she was an officer in the Air Force, and maybe they were more lenient, but insubordination could get you jail time and a dishonorable discharge for sure. I once failed to salute an officer that was driving by. I didn't even see him. The guy stopped, humiliated me in front of a group, and even threatened a court-martial. Oh, one more thing. A lot of truly creepy things go on in and around the military. Trust me. In some ways, the Marines were better, I believe, because our conduct is heavily scrutinized and discipline is expected. The Air Force does sound like a place where Robin's story, less exaggerated, of course, could possibly happen. But yeah, like exactly what I was saying, and that's why I'm glad I read this. But yeah, if that's complete insubordination if they let her get away with that. So I take everything that we're saying, this is what she did with a grain of salt, because I don't believe that she could get away with being that person in the military. No. I just don't.
I was going to say, that's not the place for individuality.
No.
She's showing them, I'm an individual.
Right, and did she go through boot camp? Was she able to survive that? And her
underwent a very brief, I don't know if it's a training, I guess, wherein she had a maid. It was a very comfortable thing.
What?
Yes, yeah, She mentions it briefly in her book. I'm sure there's no audio of it.
Who else joins the military in that capacity? I'm not even.
I don't know, but your point about it following the Vietnam War, when approval was at an all-time low, I would imagine. But when you hear commanding officers and jeeps going by and all that kind of stuff, it paints a picture that I think is probably not right for Robin's situation. She literally only worked there. So it's just you drive into your job and you work in the Army or the Air Force hospital, and then you drive off and have a life outside of it.
As part of the healing process, I decided it was time to pay a visit to an old friend in Newport News, Virginia. I hadn't seen Uncle Leroy in more than a year, and I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Uncle Leroy had shriveled into a skinny old man who needed a walker to get around, but his mind was still sharp. He knew everything, including what bad shape he was in. On my last night there, I sat alone with him by his bed. "This is the last time we're going to get to talk," he told me. "No, it's not," I insisted, fighting back tears. "Yes, it is, but it's okay," he replied, patting my hand. "I just want you to know that I love you and want you to always be happy." Once outside the door of his room, I broke down. The one person in the world who truly loved me was dying. I went back to Dayton, ready to get on with my life.
Again, another non-story about an inconsequential death in a normal family life.
Yeah. I mean, she actually did sound a little bit affected there. But who was most emotional over Uncle Leroy withering away to nothing was the Big and Tall Men's Shop.
They lost their best customer.
He's now going to the normal men's store.
It was time to start thinking about getting out of the Air Force. I could actually feel my future about to begin when the Air Force threw me a hard, fast curve. One payday, I'd noticed that my check was short and had gone to the finance office to get the discrepancy resolved. Maybe if I'd never questioned that check, everything would have been okay. As it was, I discovered that the Air Force had been overpaying me the entire time I'd been in. The whole thing was the result of a clerical error, but that didn't stop the Air Force from wanting me to return the cash. I was forced to extend my tour of duty for 6 months, taking a huge salary cut to expedite the payback. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I had no other options. At that point, my life began to unravel completely. I stopped seeing people and stopped paying bills. My phone was eventually shut off. For the first time in my life, I couldn't manage to do anything. I'd burst into tears at the drop of a hat. I lost track of time. The only thing that really made me feel better was...
I'm sorry, what's making her spiral at this point? The fact that she owes them money?
The fact that her 18-month stay in the Air Force has now been turned into 2 years.
Who paid for her college?
And then her salary has been lowered because she's been overpaid.
Who paid for her college?
I don't know. Her dad wept when she graduated, but I don't know. I don't think there's any mention of her own debts. In 2018 dollars, it's like $48,000.
That's a lot of money. It's not insubstantial. Yeah. Okay, let me finish this clip.
Really made me feel better was ice cream. Soon it became my entire diet. I was putting away up to a gallon a day. I didn't feel secure unless there was at least a half gallon in the freezer.
Does she not mention her favorites in the audiobook? Here are my favorites. We get to know that she likes Rocky Road, she likes eggnog, she likes the Yule log, there's cereal. There's anything that you can imagine.
What happened to the commissary on the base? I don't even understand.
Yeah, there's sandwiches. There's all kinds of things. I remember saying this years ago on
Big Mac for 2 for 1.
That Robin, if she was honest with herself, would have written Fast Food Maniac, not John Hine. But Robin is not honest with herself, so she has to write The Vegucation of Robin. And she loves this stuff more than John Hine does. She must still be doing it, I believe, because she's not staying at that weight by eating only pumpkin soup with no dairy.
Exactly.
As my new discharge date neared, I could see light at the end of the tunnel and began to pull myself together. I had already decided I was going to head out to California, one of the places I'd wanted to go when I joined the Air Force. The day of my discharge, I pointed my car west. I was free again and was off to California to seek my fortune. I had managed to survive the terrible darkness that had surrounded me, and now embarked on a quest to find myself in a place where nobody knew me.
Oh, is she a minor? Like, where?
You would go to a place where no one knows you. That's anywhere in the country.
Exactly.
You would only been to 2 places at that point in your entire life: Baltimore
and Ohio.
Now the Air Force Base in Ohio.
Yeah. Who is she to anyone?
The room I took was small, with a twin bed right in the center of it. You could pay by the day, week, or month, and the price included the room and 2 meals a day. It was like
Only
dorm
2?
living again. I'd seen an ad in the paper for
Where's
an
dessert?
RN to help start a new temporary nursing agency, followed it up, and got the position.
Of course she did.
San Francisco turned out to be a friendly place, but I still hadn't made any connections outside the little group I socialized with at the hotel. One day a makeup artist came to give us a demonstration, and I wound up being the model for that demonstration.
Of course you were.
She called me over and told me, "You seem like a really nice person, someone who might be open to new things."
Uh-oh.
I was flattered, and when she asked me to attend a meeting with her the following night, I accepted without bothering to ask what it was. That's how I found myself in an industrial park in South San Francisco the very next evening. After we'd pulled into the parking lot of a warehouse, I began to have my doubts. Maybe it was some wacky California cult. Inside, I was relieved to find it was warm and brightly lit, with a lot of attractive, well-dressed people standing around sipping coffee. The speaker that night was a tall, slender woman who called herself Catherine Starfire. For 45 minutes, she held us rapt as she recounted how lost and confused she had been before the day a few short months ago when she'd found herself sitting just where we were now. She claimed that after taking a workshop called Playground, her whole life had changed. Now she was a happening human being with a great job and a wonderful relationship with a man. She'd been taking workshops ever since and conducted guest lectures for free because she believed in them so much. Ever the skeptic, I tried to rattle her with some biting questions. Never losing her cool, she fielded each one with aplomb. For the first time, I felt I'd found a group of people I might consider joining. I craved the same sense of belonging that Catherine Starfire had described. The next Playground seminar was that very weekend, and I signed up that night to take it.
Well, only that. Well, one thing I wanted to touch on is that Catherine Starfire was doing these lectures without pay because she believed them so much. Robin later on starts working with them without pay, and her plan was to give them $1,000 and take classes, and hopefully then get a job. So Summit knows you latch on to certain people, they'll work for you for free. You don't have to pay them. So Catherine was one of those, and Robin became one of those. But this whole class that she ends up taking, again, she's the only one who can't speak out. It goes against her. I'm an individual. I buck the trends. I do what I want. So suddenly be afraid to speak up in a class where you have the same kind of traumas as everyone else.
Right.
It just doesn't seem right.
Right. She would have definitely spoken up if this is something that she had gone through.
Yeah.
Without question.
Come Friday evening, I was back in that same room with about 100 other people. Soon a man and a woman called trainers entered. Randy, the male...
Can we just discuss for a really quick second that she is still involved with the same cult?
Yeah.
And I told
Howard's
you...
still involved with transcendental meditation. Yeah.
And I did tell you guys, as you know, that she paid for Grillo to go to the first Landmark Forum introduction of new people thing. She paid for him to go to that. And he said, I had no idea what the fuck was going on.
Grillo has a 99 IQ. Just like Howard. Grillo actually had his tested on.
He was so upset when we posted that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they posted it on they had it on the show. They did it on the show.
I said that.
So he might be smarter than Robin to have not fallen for this thing.
Trainer explained that we'd spend the next couple of days doing processes, some of them written, others involving an activity, and still others consisting of guided meditation. Playground was a return to childhood, meant to be fun. In the first process, each of us got to watch ourselves on a monitor as a camera made a complete circle around us. The purpose, Randy explained, was to give us an idea of how we appeared to others. 100 total strangers had walked into that workshop on Friday night, but by Sunday evening we were best friends, sorry to be parting. Playground was just one of the many workshops and seminars conducted by this organization known as Summit, and I wanted to be around this wonderful energy all the time. I offered my services as a volunteer and signed up for the next available workshop, the Woman's Workshop, assuming that it would be as warm and embracing as Playground. Was I in for a surprise? Beth, the trainer for this workshop, led us through grueling, confrontational processes designed to unearth the secret traumas of growing up female. I hung back and barely participated, as others told tale after tale of abuse at the hands of fathers, brothers, friends, and strangers.
Why would she hold back?
How I managed to get through the entire weekend, I'll never know. But by Monday, I realized that I was losing my voice and assumed that I was coming down with a cold. No other symptoms ever appeared, but for the next several weeks, I couldn't speak above a whisper. I was reduced to writing notes to communicate. I did manage to croak out my problem to one of my fellow playground alumni, Danielle. To my surprise, she came right out and asked me what it was that I didn't want to say. For the first time since my father had molested me, I confessed to another person what had happened. You'd better talk to Beth about this, Danielle urged.
Why?
I sat through the Wednesday meeting without hearing a word that was said. After everyone filed out, I approached Beth, who was still standing on stage. Tears were spilling down my cheeks and my lips trembled as I struggled to make myself heard. But the more of my story I shared with Beth, the louder my voice became. By the time I got to the end, an hour had passed. Beth was holding me in her arms, and I had my voice back. I was amazed at how much better I felt, and it wasn't just getting my voice back. It was finally having someone listen to me and tell me it was okay. For a brief moment, that scared, battered little girl inside me had shown her face, and she didn't get slapped. It was a beginning.
Oh, okay. I want to read something to you. I was just looking at the Landmark Forum, and so the basic 5 tenets of the Landmark Forum are the following. They're very interesting, actually. There can be a big difference between what actually happened in a person's life and the meaning or interpretation they make up about it. Human behavior is governed by a perceived need to look good. People often pursue an imaginary someday of satisfaction. People create meaning for themselves since, quote, there is none inherent in the world. And finally, when people have persistent complaints that are accompanied by unproductive fixed ways of being and acting, this can be transformed by a creative act of generating entirely new ways of being and acting. Because she portrays herself, as we all know, rather than trying to change oneself in comparison to the past. So these are the initial teachings of Summit/Landmark Forum. I see that.
One of Robin's things was she had to reach out and apologize to those she had wronged.
Yes.
Stuttering John is one of those people.
Jackie,
she reached out to. And I think she didn't want to be the standout story. You know,
we didn't have a story.
There were women there who certainly had far worse things happen to them. She didn't want to be the worst. She didn't want to be the only one without a story. So she came up with this one after hearing everything.
Which couldn't be told out loud in front of everybody, where I'm sure they're pouring their hearts out, so why couldn't she participate and pour her heart out to these people as well? Why did hers have to be done in secret?
And it took an hour to tell that story. Did you mention the girl not saying hi to you at the mall, too? For 20 minutes of that story?
Okay.
The thing that she says about this guy, Paul, he hugged her, and her neck pain went away.
So now that she's like very involved with the summit, she's becoming emboldened to be that, you know, she needs to learn. She needs to like suck up everything she can.
I was incredibly grateful to the staff of Summit for having created a safe haven where such a breakthrough could be made. As a result, I became what is known in the field as a workshop junkie. Summit was created by a guy named Paul Larson. Legend has it that Paul had studied Eastern philosophy for many years and had once worked with Werner Erhard, the founder of EST. The workshops were designed to produce the enlightenment of the East by using Western techniques. My new friends at Summit wanted to walk the path and live with Paul. For a while, I did too. Summit was home to me. For the first time in my life, I had a circle of friends so large I was never without support or companionship. I ended up quitting the job at the temporary nursing agency because the work bored me and I never seriously looked for another one. I began doing bizarre things to make money, like selling encyclopedias, life insurance, and Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door. But it was a dismal failure.
How is anybody exactly bored being a fucking nurse? Like, I'm just curious, because anytime I've ever been in a hospital, they are constantly with people, monitoring people, doing things. This is the third time she's said, you know, that first she was nursing and she was bored. So she went into the Air Force and she was bored. And then what the fuck?
So she found a diagnosis that she liked the sound of.
That's right.
And decided that it applied to her when it doesn't.
That's right.
One thing to keep in mind, when this guy meets her, Robin just left the donut shop. And literally, she had just walked out of eating donuts.
Around that time, an atypical little affair sort of fell into my lap as I walked home down Polk Street when a very handsome young man interrupted my reverie by saying hello. He wound up walking me home, and after the world's fastest courtship, I sneaked him past hotel reception and into the first-floor bathroom so that we could be alone for a few minutes, if you catch my drift. At that moment, I didn't even know his name and never really expected to see him again. A few nights later, I was in my room getting undressed when I heard something hit my window. There, standing in a halo of lamplight.
Where does that happen other than in romance novels or in movies?
I don't know.
At your window? Like he knows exactly where her room is because they never even got up to her room?
He should have been throwing munchkins at her window. But wasn't she first floor? Isn't that what knock on the first floor window? It's like right in the center.
Okay.
Incredible night encounter. When I raised the window, he yelled up, "I thought I dreamed you." His name was Audrey. He was the most incredible lover, and after having sex with him in a parked car at the beach, I discovered something a little disturbing about myself. My car was parked right next to a truck, and the whole time we were making love, I knew we were being watched. I think that's what made it so exciting. When we finished, the guys in the truck applauded, and I didn't feel the least embarrassed. I took him to an introductory lecture one night, and to put it mildly, he was not impressed. We never really saw each other again after that night.
Because he knew you were a fucking loon who was into cults.
And let me introduce you to Starfire.
Run, Audrey, run!
Okay, I'm out of here. Let him hug you. He'll make all your pain go away.
Telling his friends, this fucking bitch. I'm still thinking about Audrey throwing fucking donut holes at her. To lure her out.
Visionism that surfaced while I was with him would later lead me down some strange and desperate paths.
Yeah, okay. All right. So much for Audrey. Oh, that's so funny. Okay.
Well, I would say that some of this California behavior does maybe give credence to the whole I was traumatized sexually as a kid,
right?
Because she now suddenly meets a stranger for the first time, but it's unusual behavior for her. It's not like it's a pattern. It's completely unusual behavior for her.
These are total anomalies in her life.
Yes, they are, and she's in a new place, and she's open to everything, and she's taking seminars. So she does that, and then she goes and has sex, and knows that she's being watched and enjoys it, and later on. Even goes even further than that. Left the Air Force, by the way, owing them money and pledging to pay them back, and didn't.
Right. So how is she actually really supporting herself? You can't tell me selling dictionaries was actually a viable, employment in 1975 or 76. My favorite line of shit in the entirety of this process. I don't know. Show of hands. Who believes this story for a fucking moment? I think she got herself into a bad situation for a job interview and wound up just getting sucked into taking naked pictures. That's what I think. Porno my balls. Let me say.
At first, I thought the key to my post-summit life was getting a different kind of job, and I found myself scouring the papers again.
I found myself. Here you go. There's that language again. I found myself.
Maybe calm my restless spirit. I found myself auditioning for a porn film director, allowing him to take a Polaroid of me naked. Then I made an appointment at a strip joint downtown. The club itself left a lot to be desired. Strippers danced on a stage under a proscenium arch, and the audience consisted mainly of derelicts who slept through the show. This wasn't exactly as I'd imagined it. In my fantasies, I performed to a well-dressed and appreciative audience, like the ones in the movie Gypsy. After that night, I knew I wouldn't find whatever it was I was looking for on that stage. I chided myself when I got home, wondering what I'd been thinking of.
I'm sorry, so are we to assume she actually stripped?
No, she didn't. She didn't show up.
So, okay, so she's not working now, right?
Right. But I just want to say that
Go ahead,
porn audition
yeah,
sounds very quaint
I know.
compared to what porn auditions are on the internet nowadays, where it's like the guy ends up having anal sex with you.
Exactly.
Well,
his dick is in your mouth as you walk in the door.
Yeah, this guy just Polaroid, and I'll get in touch with you.
He never called her back, obviously.
Never called her back. Sorry. I shopped it around every studio.
I can almost see him flicking the Polaroid into the garbage pail as she walks out the door. Okay, let me finish this one.
I decided I needed to get out of town to figure out on my own how to live in the world. I might as well go to Hollywood.
Of course.
Hoping to be discovered.
Downtown LA was dirty and seedy, full of flophouse hotels. I can't imagine what the state of my mind was, but I walked into one of these flea bags and registered. The room was just $6 a night. A neon sign blinked right outside the window of my dirty room.
Everything is like a classic movie scene.
I believe that she envisioned this being turned into a movie, by the way.
Agreed.
I really think that it didn't even occur to me until earlier today, but I thought, she keeps on doing this scene setting that I think she imagines it being turned into a movie.
Like, as I'm listening to her, I see...
And Cabaret Sidibe would have played her.
With the lights just kind of flickering, and some of the neon doesn't work, right? I mean, that's the visual she's giving us in our heads.
Yep.
$6 hotel, by the way. This is where she's staying. Okay.
The next morning, I headed for the state employment office. I spotted a counter just for vets, took my place in line, and waited my turn. It was the only time I had ever tried to apply for any kind of public assistance in my life. The pleasant-looking black man behind the desk was very solicitous as I poured out my heart.
Of course.
He referred me to what he said was a non-profit agency that dealt with GIs having trouble readjusting to civilian life. He even called the guy there to tell him.
Okay, because let's forget that she was in the Viet Cong fighting off. Right now she's battling Agent Orange. She has.
I don't even know where the nearest Wendy's is.
This is where
they don't even have Friendly's ice cream out here. It must be. You can hear the Doors playing in the background.
Robin's sitting in the corner eating Twinkies and looking around like a fucking psycho.
Remember, ask for Mel Jackson, he reminded me as I started off. Don't speak to anyone else. At the office, I introduced myself to Mel, a leathery-skinned black man. He, too, expressed great compassion, offering to help me get out of the dump where I was living. He wouldn't even let me go back there alone. I spent the rest of the afternoon waiting for him to get off work. At the end of the day, Mel rolled himself into the lobby, and for the first time I realized he was a cripple. That wheelchair was a souvenir of Vietnam. Mel told me that I needed a stake to give me some time to consider my options. He asked me how much cash I actually had on me, and when I told him about $150, he sighed heavily. To get into the game he was talking about would take about $500. With $500, I could buy some cocaine, split it, dilute it, and turn my $500 into about $2,000. $2,000 would give me room.
Mel, the handicapped Vietnam vet, who works for the Veterans Administration.
No, is a friend of the guy.
Okay, so he's saying...
At the government state office, state employment center.
So this viable, wanted, beautiful, stunning salesperson extraordinaire / nurse, the best she can do is hook up with a fucking drug dealer? This is... She's like on Skid Row, and she's...
He's every bad guy in every movie.
Exactly. You almost think that he has a trench coat on with watches underneath. Yo.
We can go sell drugs to kids at schools.
Okay, let me finish this.
To breathe. Today I'm shocked that I didn't just get up and leave. I actually considered buying and selling cocaine. Later, Mel offered me a hit of cocaine, which I declined. Although
Wait, explain later to me. Like, if she's thinking that she's got to get the fuck out of here because this guy is, like, clearly a drug dealer, how does that turn into later?
I don't know, because their entire relationship ends very briefly. So later must mean...
Well, just like every story of Robin's. Yeah, every Robin story has, like, no follow-up whatsoever.
Well, that's the thing with the third books that I mentioned, that they don't give you any sense of time, ever.
No.
Because you would realize if they did, they're just being melodramatic.
Of course, and
like,
everything happened in a
person
day.
For an afternoon.
These are all day meetings. These are this is just like a day in the life. That's all it is.
A woman who was not good enough to be in porn? She did not get a call back.
She did not get a call back.
I never heard of porn saying you're not good enough.
Ever.
There's fetishes for everything.
She's with Mel, and she's she's like, that wasn't cocaine on my face. That was powdered sugar.
He took me to a much more expensive hotel that night. I thought he had taken care of the bill and settled into my new, clean bed, worry-free. The next morning I awoke well-rested and feeling good until I passed the front desk on the way to breakfast, only to be asked to pay the bill. I parted with $22 of what little money I had and spent the rest of the day watching game shows and soaps on the TV in my room.
So instead of going to look for a fucking job because you can't afford the new hotel that he put you into, like seriously, what is that? That's what she decides to do? Oh, this is when she decides she has to go back home, right? Because she's a fucking failure.
He knew men, white men, who would pay for certain services.
Oh, now we go to prostitution.
It wasn't any big deal, according to him. Sometimes they paid big money just to look at you.
No.
Stand up and take off your clothes, he ordered. I have to inspect the merchandise. I stood and removed what I was wearing.
Straight out of like
He beckoned
Cobra.
for me to come closer, wrapping his lips around one of my nipples. I don't recall giving you permission to do that, I said, stepping back and putting on my clothes. I finally put it all together. Mel was a pimp.
She finally
and the guy
figured
at
that
the
out.
employment office was a spotter. They were trying to get me strung out and then turn me out. That nice guy at the employment agency...
Cocaine was going to get her strung out. They moved her to the big $22 hotel.
Pimp in a wheelchair.
Right.
Knife is tires. It's like really dark Mark Twain type stuff where she's just going from adventure to adventure.
You know, the funny thing about it is that now that we see it as everything being a fucking movie scene, it makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
You know, everything is like this little crazy vignette. I feel like we should be on like one of those what's that stupid ride at Disneyland where you go through the water and everything is a little fucking vignette. We're like in a fucked up, it's a small world. Like everything, like you go around another bend and there's Robin with the neon lights blinking.
She had the same fate that she had in porn. And the guy's like, I never seen anything like this, Robin. I cannot find a single thing. And I went to the most desperate-looking white man I could find. I'm a pimp. I've never apologized before. I'm sorry. I cannot find one thing.
All right, we're going to move on a little bit. We got Hi Mom, I'm a fuck up. Clearly, of course, in the movie vignette world that we're in, we've gone through drugs, prostitution, porn, right? Cults. You know, everything that you could possibly... You're kind of like the little waif girl who gets off the bus with a one-way ticket to Hollywood and finds, like, all the very bad, seediest people.
Goes west, and she's just realizing, it's a rough world out there, kid.
She's more like Friendly's Goes West. She's just...
Nice people like you, you're not going to be in the big city.
It's
she enters town and everyone's like, oh, did you hear? There's a new kid.
That's right. Okay, so this is when she has to admit that she needs to come home to the hurtful, alcoholic, foster parenting family of hers. Okay, great.
I reflected on the last couple of weeks. I was in a strange town with no resources and no friends. The one time I'd reached out for help, 2 guys had tried to ruin me. Here I was with the last $15 in my pocket, the only thing between me and the street.
She went through $105 after less than 22 that she had. Well, let me see. So she had $103 after she paid that hotel. And so,
well, how much did she get for the car her parents sold her?
She gave that all to the cult. What are you talking about? Idiot.
I think she just made it rain out of Winchell's.
I knew what I had to do. I went back to the Y, found the payphone, and made a collect call. The operator made the connection, and the party on the other end accepted. I took a deep breath and spoke one of the most difficult sentences I've ever uttered. Hi, Mom. I want to come home. I reflected on my year in California. I had nothing to show for it. Literally.
This visual is very funny.
No career, no furniture, no car, no money. I'd lost everything. I knew I was going back to Baltimore to get serious about life again.
Oh, right, again.
My brother Junior picked me up at the bus station, and as we drove through the old neighborhood, I was saddened to see that it had grown even more run down, and it made me miserable, but not as miserable as my mother's gasp made me when she opened the front door.
Oh, her return to Baltimore. Yes, of course, that makes sense. So let's play this out.
She said, staring straight at my head. What happened to your hair? My poor baby looks like an orphan. In an instant, I was back to playing by Quivers' rules. Instinctively, my hands flew in shame to cover my closely cropped afro. I'd forgotten the unspoken rule according to which a black woman never shows her kinky hair to the world. That one gasp activated years of programming that said that natural black attributes were ugly, and that it was my duty to do everything possible to mask them. I'd soon find myself in one of those beauty parlors again, applying chemicals to my tenacious kinks. Willing to do anything to avoid sitting around my mother's house, I bit the bullet one more time and got a nursing job. Then it was easier to cross the threshold of my parents' home since I paid rent to my mother.
Okay, sorry, just one really quick thing. Does everybody remember the picture of Robin in the Air Force with the fucking kinky hair?
Yeah.
Yes. What's she talking about?
She looked like Todd Bridges in the first season of Different Strokes.
She had that hair already. She was that person. I don't understand what she's saying here.
Now she got it cut really short. So short. I mean, what Robin's mom did is basically what the porn guy did. She's like, oh my God, no, that's not going to work.
You see her flinging.
Robin's mom basically said, you're not even good enough looking for porn right now.
Okay, so let's just end it with just one of the Jackie clips, because, they're always so fucking silly. Since this is a long book and we love to chat about it because it's so phenomenal, we're going to cut it off now. We'll give you a little ending here, and then we'll come back for part 2, which will probably give you, I'll release it probably in about another week or so. So let's end it with a lovely Jackie clip. Here we go. All right, good night, and we'll talk again. Okay, sweetheart?
Good.
All right.
Robin is in San Francisco.
Yes.
She's past the Air Force, and she's on her own.
Okay, on her own. Like when Marlo Thomas was that girl?
Right.
She threw her hat up in the air?
No, you're talking Mary Tyler Moore. Threw the hat up in the air.
Whatever.
Oh, whatever.
That Robin.
I thought Marlo Thomas, whatever her name is, threw it up in the air.
No.
Somebody threw it.
She just threw up. Go ahead.
This is the Polk Street incident.
All right, go ahead.
That's why I was shocked when this atypical little affair sort of fell into my lap. I was in my own little world, singing as I walked home down Polk Street, where I just grabbed a late-night snack, when a very handsome young man interrupted my reverie by saying hello.
My reverie? Holy mackerel. What is she talking about? What do you mean your reverie?
I was sort of in a zone,
You sure were.
and I was walking down the street like this singing.
I see. And you dared to interrupt me?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Yes. How dare you interrupt my reverie? My reverie?
He wound up walking me home, and after the world's fastest courtship, I sneaked him past hotel reception and into a first-floor bathroom so that we could be alone for a few minutes, if you catch my drift.
Oh, man.
At that moment, I didn't even know his name and never really expected to see him again.
You believe any of that? Go ahead.
A few nights later, I was in my room getting undressed when I heard something hit my window.
This is at a Shakespearean times.
At first, I thought it was the wind. But when it happened again...